the unadulterated exhibits that were filed on behalf of Marathon?
No, ma'am.
Okay. And I believe Mr. Hearing examiner asked you about Mr. McClure's ask of you in the last hearing, and I just want to review that to make sure we're all on the same page. As I recall, and I've looked at your transcript, the technical examiner asked you, quote, if I would ask you for additional exhibits, which provides us with the parameters and screening that went into making that determination, your determination with respect to risk, you understand what I'm asking for? And you answered, yes, sir. It would also entail a conversation with my reservoir engineer. Do you recall that exchange at the last hearing?
Yes.
And earlier in your testimony, you stated, quote, the way that we risk it from a geologic standpoint is to the EUR, economic risking basis based on geologic concern, end quote. Those are your words, isn't that right?
Yes.
And then Mr. Hearing Examiner Shakalian clarified, I think what he's asking for is what analysis did you do and what parameters did you use to come up with whatever you came up with in your expert opinion. That's what he's asking for. Do you recall Hearing Examiner Shakalian's clarification in the last hearing?
Yes.
And you recall what information Mr. McClure asked you to provide, right, with respect to your analysis of wells relating to the Upper Avalon, the Third Bone Spring Carb, and the Third Bone Spring Sand. He said, and the parameters and this APIs that were used by Marathon's geologists to make a high-risk determination of those three different target zones. Do you recall that instruction from Mr. McClure?
Yes.
Okay. You also testified, referring to the Upper Avalon, quote, I submit those wells to the Reservoir Engineering Group, and they conduct their evaluation based on spacing and completion size. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
And again, you confirmed, quote, my analysis is to come up with component wells to hand over to the Reservoir Engineering Group to put numbers to it, end quote. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes.
Okay, I realize now I'm reiterating the questions that we already went through, so I'm going to move on to the next. Turning now to your cross section, and I will share my screen now. Do you see the cross section?
Yes.
Ms. Shaheen, would you identify when you show the witness something by exhibit number and page number?
Yes, this is the first page of Supplemental Exhibit B5, PDF page 155 of 292.
Thank you.
In Exhibit B5, you state, quote, Upper Avalon and Third Bone Spring intervals vary in thickness, structural depth, lithology, and porosity. These geologic heterogeneities and structural differences are a couple of factors that increase the production variability in the area. Do I read that correctly?
Yes.
Are these all of the geologic characteristics that you used in performing your geologic concerns high-risk analysis that led to selecting the component wells in your API list?
Specific targeting is also a parameter that I use.
And what are the numerical boundaries that you applied to each of these characteristics that lead to your determination of high risk in this analysis?
What are the numerical boundary? Say that again, I'm sorry.
Yes, what are how do you define, for example, is there a range that you use with respect to each of these geologic parameters that you rely on to determine whether a well should be on your list of API wells?
So the list starts with the targeting. I get the list of APIs specifically based on geologic targeting.
Okay, and when you say geologic targeting, are you looking at particular depths?
I'd be looking at particular stratigraphy. So I don't want to pull a well that is in the middle Avalon, for instance. I want to make sure it's in the upper Avalon. So I'm looking for targeting that is going to be pretty similar to what we're looking at for the DSU would be proposing wells in.
And how do you determine what is the same target as the wells that Tumbler is proposing?
So it's not always the exact same target, but I'm looking for similar, and I correlate on well logs. So
And
just like
and excuse me, I'm sorry, if you'll just answer my question as succinctly as possible, and then I'll if I have a follow-up, I'll ask it. You mentioned the word similarities. What similarities are you referring to?
stratigraphy.
Okay, and is there a range of stratigraphy that guides your analysis?
A range of stratigraphy that guides my analysis. I'm not sure I understand the question.
What about what what stratigraphic characteristics are you looking for to determine that it's a similar target?
It would be based on my tops that I correlate.
The tops that you correlate with what?
With well logs.
The tops of the formations that you correlate with well logs?
Yes.
And so that goes, how does that, well, let's turn now to thickness. You stated that you examined the thickness as a geological parameter. First, let me ask you this. You stated thickness, structural depth. Is structural depth what you mean when you're talking about stratigraphy?
The depth would be determined based on my correlations. Yes.
Okay, so you've referenced thickness, structural depth, lithology, and porosity. Are these all of the geologic characteristics that you used in performing your geologic concern high risk analysis that led to selecting the wells in your API list?
No, those are all factors that go into variability of reservoirs. These APIs were purely selected on identifying the same stratigraphy that's being proposed.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, you chose the wells based on stratigraphy, is that right?
Yes, that's correct. Yep.
And stratigraphy, how does that, and actually let me just back up. So that is the only factor that you used in selecting the wells on your list, is that right?
Yes.
And how did you determine which wells to include and which wells to exclude?
Based on the targeting similar stratigraphy.
Turning to thickness, what did you consider with respect to thickness when you applied that parameter to your analysis?
That just goes into the variability.
And what, is there some sort of measurement with respect to thickness that you used when you considered that parameter in reaching your conclusions about variability?
It'd just be a delta between the stratigraphy, the tops that I picked.
Between the tops that you picked and what?
In the well logs.
But if I understand correctly, you're saying it's a difference between the tops and something else. And so my question is, what's the something else?
It would be the thickness in another well. So it'd be the changing in thickness of the different stratigraphic intervals in different areas of the basin.
Okay, so maybe I should ask a more general question. What are the parameters or cutoffs that you use to determine a well is high risk?
Well, it'd be the lack of data in the area of similar targeting. I don't know if that answers your question.
So you're saying you didn't use any parameters or cutoffs? You just relied on the fact that you had a lack of data?
Objection, misstates testimony.
You can answer if you understand.
Oh,
I'm sorry,
hold
go
on,
ahead.
Ms. Sheen.
My bad.
Overruled. Go ahead. Is there a
Can you
question
ask
there,
again?
Ms. Sheen?
Yes, yes. So if I understand correctly, you didn't actually use any numeric quantifiers to determine whether a well is high risk. You just relied on your lack of data. Is that right?
The lack of data is a big driver of the uncertainty, yes.
So you did not rely on any quantitative factors. Is that right?
We do look at quantitative factors, yes.
What quantitative factors or parameters did you look at?
Porosity is a big one.
And is there a range, a high and a low for porosity that you use to determine whether a well is high risk?
Is there a range of porosity that I use to determine if a well is high risk? Was that the
Yeah.
question?
Yes, that's the question.
Not in the specific analysis, no.
So what did you consider with respect to porosity?
That it's present.
That it's present in in what quantity, or how do you measure whether it's present or not?
In this specific analysis, I was looking at the density porosity. So we measure rho B and then we adjust it for what we expect the density of the reservoir to be. And then it gives us a percent porosity, which would be the void space in the reservoir. That would
Okay,
be
and
filled with fluid.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, it just tells us it quantifies the amount of fluid that could be available in the stratigraphy.
And so are there numbers that you use when you make that determination?
Yes.
And what numbers are those?
It'd be 0 to 100%, I guess. So 0, there's no porosity. So it's all rock. 100% would be 100% porosity. And then 1% porosity can still give you fluid. 0% can't.
Turning now to lithology. How did you apply the lithology parameter in determining whether a well is high risk?
I was looking at what I would consider or interpret as carbonates as non-productive intervals. And I was looking for the sands, silts, and shells as productive intervals.
Okay, and how did you determine? Did you use some numerical factor to determine, to make that determination?
On lithology,
Yes.
yes, I would use the gamma ray to interpret lithology, along with the resistivity to interpret lithology.
And what ranges for the lithology and the resistivity did you use to determine that a well is high risk?
I would use a very low gamma ray to interpret that as being a carbonate interval, which is not going to be productive in some areas.
And what do you, when you say a very low gamma ray, is there a number you can put to that?
Not specifically, no.
And what did you use as a guide then?
My experience as being a geologist.
I'm just trying to get an idea what you mean by low.
Less than 50.
Less than 50. So if the lithology, if the gamma ray was less than 50, then you would consider it a high risk well?
No, I would consider that potentially a carbonate.
Okay,
Or
and
salts.
how? I'm sorry?
Or it would be the gamma ray would be showing anything that has a low radioactive material in it. And so that can be several different materials, but that's one of the ways that I was trying to interpret lithology.
And how does that apply to determining whether a well is high risk?
So if it's carbonate, based on my interpretation, and it does not have any porosity, that would reduce the net to gross in the area of that reservoir, which would reduce the amount of fluid you could produce.
So looking at your log, are you saying that there's not any porosity in the upper Avalon?
I am not saying that.
What are you saying with respect to porosity in the upper Avalon?
That there's variability in it.
And what is the range of variability?
Well, if you look at the well on the far left, I would estimate it has about 3 times as much porosity in the upper Avalon compared to the well that's in the Goliath DSU.
You're looking at this well here where my hand is?
That's correct.
And that's with respect to porosity. Am I on the right page here?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
Okay, and then going back to lithology, let's talk about what numbers you applied in your considerations relating to lithology.
Was that a question? I'm sorry.
Yes, let's talk about what numerical parameters you may have used in your analysis relating to lithology. Can you tell me what numbers were used to determine whether a well is high risk?
The lithology would be based on if we think that is a pay lithology or if it's a non-pay lithology. So it goes into the net to gross estimate or evaluation. And so we don't expect the carbonates to be productive in this area. And so we exclude those from contributing fluid in that area or in that target.
What percentage of carbonate to sand to organics do you find in any of these wells?
What percent carbonate to sand to organics?
Yes.
It varies over the interval.
And is there a range of that percentage that you use to determine whether a well is high risk?
I think the risk would be determined from the variability and the lack of wells in the area that were landed in that interval.
And so you're saying that you don't have a percentage of carbonate as it relates to sand or organics. Is that right?
Not in this specific evaluation, no.
Okay, and you've not done that with any of these wells that are on your API list. Is that right?
I mean, we have, not in this cross section, no.
That wasn't my question. My question is with respect to any of the wells that you've provided in your API list.
I did not provide any phase cheese analysis, no.
Even though you didn't perform that analysis, you still use these parameters to identify the component wells in all of your slides regarding the Avalon, the third Bone Spring carbonate, and the third Bone Spring sand. Is that right?
Those APIs were specifically chosen on targeting. So targeting similar stratigraphy.
Right, but how did you then apply those to determine that the wells were high risk?
It would be the variability in the 6-month cum per foot analysis. Or math.
Does the first Bone Spring sand and the second Bone Spring sand that Conoco is targeting show variation across this cross section with respect to porosity?
Yes.
Does it show variation across this cross section on Conoco's targeted formations with respect to structural depth?
Yes.
That was a yes. I'm sorry, I didn't hear.
Correct. Yes.
And does the first Bone Spring sand and the second Bone Spring sand that Conoco is targeting or Marathon show variation across this cross section with respect to lithology?
Yes.
Same question with respect to thickness.
There is variability. Yes.
Turning now to the next slide, which will be PDF, I want to say 56. We need to make it a little smaller here. Is this the well list you use to make a high risk determination for the Upper Avalon?
Yes.
Is this the well list you gave to your engineers to generate Conoco's type curves?
No, this is the list that I was providing to show the variability.
You identify these wells as, quote, analogs. What are these wells analogous to?
Stratigraphic targeting in the upper Avalon.
And how does that compare to the target that Tumbler has proposed?
It would be the same stratigraphic area.
And how would you describe that stratigraphic area?
The lower portion of the upper Avalon.
The lower portion of the upper Avalon. And so with respect to these wells being analogs, is it fair to say they're not analogous as to the other geological parameters that we've discussed?
Object to the question. I think it's confusing.
I can ask it. Oops, sorry.
Ms. Shaheen, I was looking at another document when you asked that question, so I didn't hear the question. Would you ask it again so I can hear it?
Yes. So, and maybe I should preface it so that the previous testimony of Mr. Patrick is there as the background. So, if I understand correctly, the only analog with respect to these wells is the stratigraphic parameter. Is that right?
Wait, hold on. You're just repeating the question to me so I can make a ruling.
Oh, okay. So
What is the question?
The question is, these wells are not analogous as to the other geological parameters that we've been discussing. Is that right? That's the question.
Ms. Hardy, you feel that's confusing?
Yes, I do, because I'm not sure what Ms. Shaheen is referencing as to other geological parameters.
Okay. All right. So, Ms. Shaheen, I'm going to sustain the objection without going through a whole bunch of back and forth. Just rephrase it. I'm sure you can do it. You can do that.
Okay. Yes, I can. So, Mr. Patrick, if I understand correctly, your testimony is that these wells are analogous to the stratigraphic target of the wells that Tumbler is proposing in the upper Avalon. Is that right?
That's correct.
And they are not analogous with respect to porosity, correct?
Correct.
And they're not analogous with respect to structural depth. Is that right?
There is some differences, yes.
And they're not analogous with respect to lithology. Is that correct?
Lithology does change over this area.
That's my question, is whether the wells that you've chosen are analogous to are also analogous with respect to structural depth. Did you consider structural depth when you determined whether a well is analogous?
No, I only chose these wells based on stratigraphic targeting.
Okay, and did you consider thickness when you determined whether a well was an analog well?
No, only stratigraphic targeting.
Turning to your list here, you'll see that the first well is the Brunson well. Do you see that? I can make it a little bigger.
Yep, Brunson, I see it.
What is the thickness, porosity, lithology, and structural depth of the Brunson well?
I can't tell you specifically off the top of my head.
Do you know whether it's the same as the Upper Avalon target that Tumbler proposed to drill?
No.
You don't know. Is that right?
Correct.
With respect to the Jackson Trust wells, here we go right here. Do you see where my hand is?
Yes, ma'am.
Same questions. What is the thickness, porosity, lithology, and structural depth of the Jackson Trust C12 well?
I can't tell you off the top of my head.
And do you know whether it's the same as the Upper Avalon target that Tumbler's proposed to drill?
I would assume it's different.
With respect to the North Blondie wells, what is the thickness, porosity, lithology, and structural depth of the North Blondie wells?
I can't tell you specifically, no.
Do you know whether those wells target the Upper Avalon target that Tumbler has proposed to drill?
They target a similar area, similar stratigraphic interval, yes.
Turning to the rail splitter well, what is the thickness, porosity, lithology, and structural depth of the rail splitter well?
It would have to be estimated.
Have you estimated it?
We could go through that process together if you want.
I'm asking you, have you done that? Have you done that?
Have I? No, not specifically, no.
And do you know whether the rail splitter targets the same Upper Avalon target that Tumbler has proposed to drill?
It should be similar.
What do you mean it should be similar?
It should be drilled in the Upper Avalon from my correlation.
Do you know how the thicknesses, porosity, lithology, and structural depths of any of the wells we've just talked about compare with Tumbler's target?
It's variable, yes.
I'm not sure that answers my question. How do those thicknesses, porosity, lithology, and structural depths compare with Tumbler's target?
There would be differences.
Do you know what those differences are?
Not off the top of my head.
Have you considered those differences?
Yes, we consider those. That's why we think that the variability in the Upper Avalon increases the uncertainty of what we expect the wells to perform in the Goliath unit. Therefore, we made a determination, or I made the determination, that there was geologic risk in the Upper Avalon.
I'm a little confused because if I understand the answers to your questions that I just asked you, you had not looked, you don't know what the thickness, porosity, lithology, and structural depth of those wells were. Didn't you answer that in the negative?
Yes, because it's variable. Yes.
Mr. McClure asked for the parameters. What are the parameters that you apply to those characteristics?
Those, yeah, be the thickness, structural depth, lithology, porosity. Yep.
And if you don't know what they are with respect to each of these wells, how do you know that they're different?
by looking at the variability on the logs.
Did you look at a log for each of these wells?
I pulled logs in the area.
But you didn't look at the logs for each of these wells that are on your well list, did you?
No.
What are the cutoffs for those parameters?
For what parameters?
Thickness, porosity, lithology, and structural depth.
I didn't use cutoffs. That would be more of a pay determination.
Were similar rock properties used to establish this well list?
No, this well list was derived specifically from stratigraphic targeting.
In your well list, is there a certain distance that you use to select the wells?
I tried to keep it within the bounds of major structural differences, such as the Central Basin Platform to the east, Antelope Ridge to the north, or the depot center of the basin to the west. So I tried to make sure that we weren't pulling wells from different major geologic features.
So could you estimate the mile range of that area that you've looked at for wells that you believe are analog?
I believe this map is showing roughly 100 square miles.
This exhibit also displays, quote, analog 6-month cumulative production ranges between 4 to 13 barrels of oil per foot. Would you agree with that? Let me scoot this over so that you can see.
This does show cum per foot oil production for the first 6 months.
And do you agree that what you've shown here ranges between 4 and 13 barrels of oil per foot?
Yeah, it looks like 4.18 on the low end and 13.92 on the high. Yes.
And 6-month cumulative production is literally a measurement of production after completion and not a geologic property of the rock, correct?
You're correct.
I'm sorry, you said correct?
That's correct. Yes.
If you, excuse me, sorry, I'm making a switch here. Do geological parameters affected by operational conditions such as parent-child interference, takeaway constraints, artificial lift and choke management, are geological parameters affected by those things?
No.
Do you know if 6-month production may be affected by many other factors unrelated to geology?
It can be.
And so 6-month production is not a geologic parameter for selecting analogous wells. Is that right?
It is not. That's correct.
And so it's not a geologic parameter for determining whether a well is high risk, right?
It is a parameter. Yeah, it could be because the variability.
It could be a geologic parameter.
Well, we would tie these numbers to geologic parameters.
Calling your attention to the Gunner 8 wells that you show here on your list. You've got 6 Gunner 8 wells, is that right?
Looks like it.
Would you say that the geologic parameters between those wells exhibit high variability?
I would assume that would be moderate variability since they're all in the same unit.
What do you mean by moderate variability?
There is going to be some variability.
How
A
much?
qualitative. It's a qualitative statement.
You mean it's subjective?
Yeah, it's subjective.
You don't have an objective measure for that variability, do you?
No.
Yet those wells show a wide range of variability in results. If you look over here in the last column to the right, you'll see a range from 5.66 barrels of oil per foot to 13.88 barrels of oil per foot. Do you see that?
No.
You don't see that?
Oh, yeah, 13.8 at the top. Yes, ma'am, I do.
Okay. And did the geology change between when the first well was spud in October of 2011 and the last well was spud on July 27th of 2015?
Geology did not change, no.
Is it possible that other factors contributed to this variability in barrels of oil per foot since the geology is not highly variable between the wells?
There are several factors that go into that, yes.
If you were to exclude the wells drilled prior to 2013 from this list of wells, what would the effective range of results become?
I can't tell you without actually doing the work.
Well, take a minute there. Take a look at your table.
Exclude the ones before when?
Exclude the wells prior to 2013.
So 4. And then 11. This should be 4, 13, 10. Looks like it would be 13.92 to, that's 4.06. To 5.01, I believe. 2016.
And if you were to perform the same exercise with respect to wells drilled prior to 2016, what would the effective range of results become?
Looking at the wells drilled before 2016?
No, if you were to exclude the wells drilled prior to 2016, what would the range of barrels of oil for the first 6 months look like?
So that's 16, 13. Those are all before. So North Blondie and Rail Splitter. I believe 9.1 to 13 point, no, 13.93.
Are geological parameters affected by the advances in completion designs between 2010 and 2025?
No.
You just testified that production can change based on engineering, didn't you?
I don't think so.
Well, I asked you earlier. Let's see if I can find that line of questioning. Well, let me just ask it again. Can production change based on engineering?
Yes.
So all you're trying to establish here in this slide is that production exhibits variability within the area that you've identified, but you haven't established how or how much geology contributes to the variability. Isn't that right?
I provided the cross section so you could look at the geologic variability.
How much did the geology affect variability? 40%?
I don't have a specific percentage.
How much did the production? Is it just a production variability?
Sorry, is just what a production variability?
Is the variability that you're trying to establish here in this slide with respect to the upper Avalon, is that simply a result of production variabilities?
I am showing variability in the production in this table, yes.
What geological parameter do you contend affected variability in this production?
I would say the biggest geologic parameter would be porosity.
But you've already testified that you didn't look at porosity with respect to each of these wells, correct?
It's on the first slide of this exhibit.
No, my question
can-
is with respect to this list of wells on this slide, the upper Avalon wells. You didn't examine porosity with respect to each of these wells, did you?
No.
How much does geologic variability contribute to the production variability?
I would say it would have a range, most likely.
And what is that range?
0 to 100%.
But you haven't established a range with respect to these wells, have you?
Not in these exhibits, no.
And have you otherwise? Somewhere else that we haven't seen?
Are you asking if I've quantified the variability in the geology?
I'm asking you, what have you quantified the range of how much geologic variability contributes to production variability?
Not in these exhibits, no.
How much does geologic variability contribute to production variability on a well by well basis?
It would have a range.
I'm sorry, do you have a range? I don't have any ranges. I'm not a geologist. I have to rely on you for the ranges.
I mean, it could be 0 to 100%.
Well, if I ask that same question, I'm asking it with respect to your well list. Which well on this list? Can you explain to me on any of these wells on your list how much geologic variability contributes to the production variability on any particular well in this list?
No, I guess not.
Turning now to the next slide, which is PDF 157. Let me make this a little smaller. This slide relates to the third bone carb. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And here is your well list here. It's 4 wells. Let me make that a little bit bigger. Is this the well list you use to make a high risk determination for the third Bone Spring carb?
Yes.
Is this the well list you gave to your engineers to generate Conoco's type curves?
No.
Why is there a difference between the two?
Well, I guess I'm gonna object. We haven't filed any type curves in this case. So
Ms.
I don't
Shaheen?
know what he was talking about.
Yes, in his previous testimony, Mr. Patrick testified that he selects wells and he provides them to his engineers so they can do their type curves. And so I'm asking him, is this the well list that he gave to the engineers to perform Conoco's type curve for this formation, the third Bone Spring carb?
But Ms. Shaheen, what the test, so you're relating this question now back to former testimony from the contested hearing?
That's correct.
All right. Now, we're not reopening this entire hearing. We've only reopened the evidentiary record to accept these supplemental exhibits, and the direct and cross have to be within the same scope. And so we don't have that scope here.
My understanding is that he testified that he selects the wells based on geologic parameters that he then provides to Conoco's engineers to generate their type curves. That was his testimony.
I'm not disputing that, Ms. Shaheen. That's not the point I'm trying to make here. Is we're not here to reopen the entire hearing. We're not going back over an entire contested hearing to allow you to cross-examine him on every subject that came up at the contested hearing. That's over with. We're only here to deal with these exhibits that you objected to. So I'm going to sustain that objection because it's outside the scope of his direct when it comes to these exhibits.
Okay, I'll move on.
Thank you.
Again, here you identify these wells. Well, you identify these particular wells as analog wells. And again, we've already talked about analog wells. I just want to confirm for the record that with respect to the third Bone Spring carb, these are analog wells based on the stratigraphic considerations relating to the targeted zone. Is that right?
That's correct.
They're not an analog with respect to any geological parameters, right?
Only the stratigraphic targeting.
How are these wells analogous to the target that Tumbler is drilling?
They were landed similar to the stratigraphic targeting that Tumbler was proposing.
What is the thickness, porosity, lithology, and structural depth of the Queen Robin wells that you have identified here?
I can't tell you specifically.
You haven't considered that,
No.
correct? Same question with respect to the Los Vaqueros wells. Do you know what the thickness, porosity, lithology, and structural depth of the Los Vaqueros wells are?
No.
And so you don't know how those parameters of those wells compare with Tumbler's target, do you?
No.
Were similar rock properties used to establish this well list?
No. Only stratigraphic targeting.
Again, in this well list, is there a certain distance that you use to select these wells?
I believe this is also a roughly 100 square miles.
This exhibit also displays 6-month cumulative oil per foot, correct?
Correct.
And we talked earlier, this is really a measurement of production after completion and not a geologic property of the rock, right?
Correct.
And you can't testify as to whether a 9 barrel of oil per foot 6-month cumulative production for a well is economically viable, can you?
No.
Does the small map in the lower right-hand corner, and I'll make this bigger, this map right here, does this map display all of the wells that are analogs, as you defined earlier, or are there other wells in the same target located in this larger, roughly 180 square mile area?
I don't know. I provided this screenshot so you could see the well names listed. For
And
the
so
wells.
you don't know whether there are other wells in the same target area that are nearby?
That are inside this map view,
Yes.
there potentially could be.
Have you included every well in the formation?
No.
Does this well list represent all of the wells within the distance that you've identified?
No.
Does this map and this list represent all the wells in your range?
That map is showing the 4 wells that I identified on the other map. The fielded view is different.
Does this well list represent all of the wells that relate to the stratigraphic target?
The similar stratigraphic targeting in the field of view of the other map, yes.
Are you familiar with the Ludman wells, the 202H and the 1408H that are operated by Conoco?
I guess no.
Now, those wells are within 5 miles of the David development. I'll represent that to you. But those wells do not appear in your list or on your map, do they?
I do not see them listed.
Why were those wells excluded?
It would have to be, I interpreted them as being in a different stratigraphic interval.
Focusing again on the smaller map. Are there any other Third Bone Spring carb wells within this area?
There could be potentially.
Would you agree that this map is a little misleading because it doesn't include all of the wells in the Third Bone Spring carb?
Object to the question as being argumentative.
I sustain that. Ms. Shaheen, would you please rephrase that question?
Would you agree that this map is inaccurate because it doesn't include all of the wells in the Third Bone Spring carb?
Same objection.
That's overruled. Please answer the question.
There is a different field of view between the two maps.
Why didn't you include those wells in your analysis?
I must have interpreted them to be landed in a different stratigraphic interval.
Turning now to the next slide. Let me make sure I'm going to the next slide. I believe it's 158. And this slide relates to the Third Bone Sand, Third Bone Spring sand, correct? Oops.
That's specifically the middle, what I interpreted as the middle Third Bone Spring sand.
And is this the well list you use to make a high risk determination for the Third Bone Spring sand?
Yes.
And did you give this well list to the engineers to generate Conoco's type curves?
Objection. Same objection I made earlier.
Outside the scope?
Yes, outside the scope. We're not talking about type curves.
Shaheen?
That's fine. I'll move on.
Thank you. Sustained.
Again, you identify these wells as analogs. And to what are these wells analogous?
Similar stratigraphic targeting.
Similar stratigraphic targeting to what?
To the mid Third Bone Spring sand wells that Tumbler proposed.
And is the target interval the only way that these wells are analogous to the target that Tumbler is drilling?
That is how I selected this well list, yes.
Do you know what the thickness, porosity, lithology, and structural depth of the Queen Robin well is?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Do you know whether it's the same as that part of the Third Bone Spring sand that Tumbler proposes to target?
No.
Do you know what the thickness, porosity, lithology, and structural depth of the Greeby well is?
Yeah, no.
Do you know whether it's the same as that portion of the Third Bone Spring sand that Tumbler proposes to target?
No.
And can I assume that your answers to those same questions would be the same answers with respect to the Tatanka wells and the Judge Baylor wells?
Yes.
Were similar rock properties used to establish this well list?
No.
And in this particular well list, is there a certain distance that you use to select the wells?
I was trying to stay off the major geologic structures or features in the area So I believe this is, once again, roughly that 100 square mile distance.
And did you use that distance to limit the wells that you considered?
Yes, to stay away from major geologic structures.
And here you've got, we're looking again at your list. Do you know that the Mean Green well was drilled in 2015?
I do not know the specific date it was drilled.
Are you aware that the Mean Green well is the oldest well on this list?
I guess I am now.
Do you know that the Greevy Com well is a child well that was drilled 4 years after an underlying Wolfcamp A well?
No.
If you were to exclude the Greevy well and the Mean Green well, what would be the range of 6-month cumulative production in this list of wells?
The range of 6-month cum per foot would be 16.24 to Greevy. Is it 6.98? Yeah, I believe that's right.
The phrase mid-third Bone Spring sand appears for the first time in your amended Exhibit B5, doesn't it?
I believe so.
That term doesn't appear in your written testimony or any prior marathon and geologic exhibits, does it?
I guess not.
There are no regional stratigraphic markers or tops published by the Oil Conservation Division defining a mid-third Bone Spring sand, are there?
There is not.
You introduced that label solely for this October submission, is that right?
Yes.
So it's your own interpretation, not an established geologic interval recognized by the division, correct?
It's where I interpreted Tumbler's proposals in the third Bone Spring sand.
And what's the difference between the mid-third Bone Spring sand and the lower third Bone Spring sand?
That would be an internal correlation.
So there's no, and when you say internal to Conoco?
Yes.
Is there a difference in porosity between the mid-third Bone Spring sand and the and the lower third Bone Spring sand?
I would assume so.
You would assume so. What would you base that assumption?
Logs. I would look at the porosity logs.
Have you looked at the porosity logs of each of these wells?
I doubt these wells have porosity logs run on them unless it was cased hole, but I have not looked at them.
Have you looked at any porosity logs with respect to the mid-third Bone Spring sand, as you call it?
Yeah, they're on that first page with the cross section, and
No,
I think there's a well here.
I'm sorry. Have you looked at porosity with respect to these wells that you attribute as landing in the mid-third Bone sand?
In these horizontals?
In the wells that are identified on this list on slide 158 of 292.
No, I've not looked at the porosity logs of those
Have you
wells.
looked, have you looked at porosity with respect to any wells in the lower Third Bone Spring sand?
Uh, no,
Is there a frac barrier within the Third Bone Spring sand that separates the mid Third Bone Spring sand from the remainder of the Third Bone Spring sand?
I don't believe so. You're asking the lower to the mid third sand?
I'm asking, is there any frac barrier within the Third Bone Spring sand that separates the mid from the remainder of the formation?
I don't think so.
You considered spud dates important in the other two slides, did you not?
I provided them, yeah.
Why did you omit those spud dates in this slide?
It was an error on my part, and I forgot to copy that column.
Isn't it fair to say that your testimony is simply you don't know what reserves are in the Avalon or the Third Bone Spring? Isn't that right?
Objection. I think that misstates testimony and it's also argumentative.
Miss Shaheen, would you ask that question differently, please?
If I understand your testimony today, you don't really know what reserves are in the Avalon. Is that correct?
I do not have it quantified.
And you don't know how to tie 6-month cumulative production to EURs, right? That's outside of your expertise.
That's correct. I do not do any forecasting.
And you don't know what reserves are in the Third Bone Spring either, correct?
Do not have it quantified.
And you don't know whether 6-month production is how it relates to whether a well is economically viable, right?
I don't do economics.
And you don't know how geologic parameters impact 6-month production, do you?
No, I don't, but I do interpret differences in geologic factors.
But you don't know how geologic parameters impact 6 months production with any kind of quantitative certainty, do you?
I mean, if there's zero porosity, then you would have zero fluid available to be produced. So, I mean,
Have you examined any wells that indicate there's zero porosity throughout these 3 intervals?
no.
Okay, Mr. Examiner, I may be close to being done. If I could have just a couple minutes with my client, we may be able to wrap this up.
Okay, well, then there's still going to be questions from Mr. McClure and any redirect from Miss Hardy. So maybe you'll mean wrap up your cross. Why don't we take a 5-minute break? And we'll come back on the record at 3:47. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. It is 3:51 p.m. We had a little break. Ms. Shaheen, please continue.
Thank you. I think I have 3, maybe 4 questions, and then we'll be done. So I'd like to share my screen again. Turning to the log over here that you have, Mr. Patrick,
Yes, ma'am.
can you show me where the third bone spring, sorry, can you show me where the mid third bone spring sand starts?
It's not on this log.
Can you tell me what depth the third bone spring sand starts?
No, it would just only be an estimate.
Where does it end? Do you know?
It'd have to be an estimate right now. I don't have it plotted on this log.
Are there any geologic parameters that relate specifically to the mid third bone spring sand?
It's a correlation that we make, and it's to help identify specific targeting for wellbores.
And there are more wells targeting the third bone springs sand than you've depicted on your map. Is that right?
Yes, that's a larger interval than where the wells were specifically being proposed.
And do you know how thick that mid third bone spring interval is?
No, I do not have it plotted on the log.
Those are all of my questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Patrick.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Shaheen. Mr. McClure.
Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner. Mr. Patrick, can I draw your attention to your third bone spring slide? If we could share that, Ms. Hardy.
Let me pull that up. This one, Mr. McClure, or the
The next one. Yeah. Oh,
this
it
one?
should be the last of the slides, I believe.
Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
158.
Thank you, Ms. Hardy. Mr. Patrick, do you see what we're looking at on the screen there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so, I mean, this kind of covers some, I guess, what Ms. Shaheen's questions were, but just to summarize and make sure I'm on the same page. Is it accurate to say that the small map does not include all wells within the third Bone Spring sand?
So that's correct.
To summarize, maybe what Marathon's position is here, is it accurate to say that what went into producing these exhibits is that you identified the wells within the target formation, like specifically here, the third Bone Spring, and then you just included all the wells within a certain radius in your table? Is that correct?
I refined the well list down specifically on where they were targeting within the formation. So I was only looking for wells that were landed close to the middle point of the third Bone Spring sand, and not wells that were drilled almost on the interface or wells that were drilled just below the second Bone Spring sand. So I was trying to specifically hone in on specific targeting, even refiner than just what formation.
Is that accurate for the third Bone Spring carbonate?
Yes, sir.
Okay. For the third Bone Spring sand, why did you select the middle of the third Bone Spring sand?
That was where I correlated Tumbler's proposed development.
Okay, then is it accurate to say that high risk is determined based upon the economic variables involved? Actually, let me rephrase that. Is it accurate to say that Marathon's considering it high risk if there's a concern they may not make back their initial investment from production from the well?
We're determining this as high risk due to the uncertainty around the lack of data in the area. Production data that we could tie back to expected performance.
On this slide here, is it not correct that you identified 8 wells, it looks like, that you're drawing data from?
I do believe so.
Does Marathon not does Marathon not complete into a formation unless there's greater than 8 wells in the area showing production?
I don't know specifically. I don't think there's a specific cutoff on a number of wells that we would then produce or drill a well in that area or zone.
Isn't your testimony is that those zones are high risk, but you don't know what the cutoff is for that? I mean, how did you make the determination it's high risk, I guess?
That would be the geologic variability that we see in the logs, and then the lack of or the minimal production data that we can tie back to those specific targets.
Well, beyond giving us the cross section, isn't the only data you gave us was these production numbers?
Yes, sir.
So it was Marathon making the determination of these production numbers?
But you cut out for a second. Could you repeat that?
Is it accurate to say that Marathon made its high risk determination based off of these production numbers?
These production numbers were provided to show the variability that we see in this interval based on the specific targeting that I identified. That goes into the variability, increases uncertainty, so then we apply a risk to it.
Okay, so then Marathon made a high risk determination because it doesn't know how much oil it would produce if it drilled these wells. Is that accurate?
That's accurate, yes, sir.
How many barrels per foot within the 6 months would the well need to produce for Marathon to drill a well?
I wouldn't know specifically.
If you don't know what value you're looking for, how are you able to make the determination, I guess?
That it's high risk?
Correct.
I think that would be more of the lack of data that we have. And then once more data is collected, then we could consider it de-risked, and then we would have the opportunity to come back and develop those intervals.
Okay, now earlier Ms. Hardy asked you a question specifically about this third Bone Spring sand. She asked you if Marathon would be able to come back and complete this zone at a later time. Do you recall that question?
Yes, sir.
And your response was that Marathon could come back at a later time and complete this zone. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
What were you basing that determination off of?
Acquiring more data and de-risking this interval.
Did you take into account the existence of Wolfcamp A wells in the area?
We would in the analysis.
In your response to Ms. Hardy that Marathon could come back and complete the Bone Spring 3 sand at a later time, did you take into account that Marathon would also have wells within the Wolfcamp A at that time?
We would factor that into our evaluation. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I understand that Marathon would factor that in at a later point. Did you factor it in currently in your current response that yes, Marathon can go back and produce it?
Did I factor?
Yes, you
I'm
came to, you want me to re-ask the question, Mr.
Yes,
Patrick?
I don't quite understand.
Okay, you made an affirmative statement that Marathon could come back in at a later point and place wells in the third Bone Spring sand, correct?
Yes, sir.
Now, in this hypothetical future where Marathon determines it is economically viable to put in wells, were you considering the fact that Wolfcamp A wells would likely be already producing at that point?
Yes, sir.
Are you familiar with completions of wells?
Yes, sir.
And you considered the vertical height difference between the Wolfcamp A and wells within the Bone Spring 3 sand and frac barriers associated in between?
Yes, sir. We would put a degradation on that.
You reference we, but are you referencing your own testimony or somebody else with that, I guess?
I'm referencing workflows I've worked with my team on other projects, but not specifically by testimony.
No further questions. Thank you, Mr. Patrick. Thank you, Mr. Hearing Examiner.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you, Mr. McClure. Ms. Hardy.
Yes, thank you. I do have some questions. Mr. Patrick, when Ms. Shaheen was questioning you earlier, you testified that these slides, and I'm referring to pages 156 through 158 of the PDF, that you selected these wells based on stratigraphic targeting, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and can you explain what that means?
It would be based on where these wells are landed compared to where the wells are being proposed. And then most of my tops in this example are lithostratigraphic tops. And so it take into consideration the log parameters for the interval.
In your experience as an asset geologist, is that a reasonable and reliable way to evaluate risk of a geologic interval?
Yes.
Why?
Using lithostratigraphic correlations means you should be in similar reservoirs, but we still understand that there is variability inside those reservoirs.
And Ms. Shaheen asked you a number of questions about whether you looked at lithology, thickness, and porosity for each well listed on your slides. Do you recall those questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, first of all, are there logs available for each of these wells?
Most likely not.
And did you need to look at the lithology, thickness, and porosity for each individual well to make an assessment of geological risk of the zone?
No, we look at offset logs and then we interpret and make maps to assume what the reservoir porosities, thickness, lithologies will be for those wells.
And is that what you've done here?
Yes, that's what I did.
And in your cross section here in the first page of supplemental exhibit B5, is that what you were showing with this cross section?
Yes, ma'am.
So based on your analysis, the wells on the cross section are representative of what you believe would be what is shown in the geology in this area.
Yes.
And with respect to the two different maps that are shown here on each slide, can you just explain so it's clear what the differences are and what you're showing?
The small map in the bottom right was just a courtesy that I put on the slide so that you could put the well name to the specific well.
And are the wells listed in your slides based on your geological analysis the best available analogs that you have to evaluate risk in these zones?
They are the best representation of wells that were drilled in the same stratigraphic interval.
And within a certain within a certain distance from the wells here, right?
Yes, I was trying to stay away from some of the major geologic differences.
And so I think you mentioned earlier 100 square miles, but if you're looking at a radius from the wells here, the Goliath proposed wells, approximately what's the mileage radius for these analogs that you were using?
1, 2, 3, 4. Looks like roughly 5 miles.
And was that, in your analysis, in your opinion, the best distance to use to address geologically similar areas?
It kept us away from some major features in the area. We have the Central Basin Platform that influences the reservoirs to the east. If we go to the west, we have the depot center of the Delaware Basin. So I was trying to keep it out of some of these major differences. And, similar as you go north, we have the Antelope Ridge. So, and some major faulting. So I was trying to keep it to a more constrained radius.
And when you get further out than, say, 10 miles, does the geology change?
It does.
And so that's part of the reason you use these wells. Is that correct?
That went into my analysis. Yep.
And I think several times you mentioned a lack of data. Does that impact the risk assessment?
It increases our uncertainty, which increases our risk in our interpretation.
And is the lack of data more prevalent in some zones here than others?
Yes.
And which zones primarily are subject to a lack of data?
We would consider the Third Bone Spring Carb having very limited data, and also the Third Bone Spring Sand.
And in your analysis, that creates risk.
That creates risk, yes.
And then in the Avalon, is there a lack of data or is it a variability issue?
We think the reservoir variability from the existing proved, developed, producing wells to where the Goliath project is significant. So we have wells that are landed stratigraphically similar, but we do see a variability in the reservoir quality.
And that's specifically within this radius shown on your map on slide 156, right?
Yes,
Okay. And that's about a 5-mile radius?
yes.
Thank you. I think those are all of my questions.
Thank you. Ms. Shaheen, is there any additional cross on those questions?
Thank you, Mr. Examiner. I believe we only have one question. Ms. Hardy was asking Mr. Patrick about the lack of data. And so my question is that a lack of data with respect to production data or a lack of data with respect to well logs?
That'd be focused on production data.
Thank you.
Mr. McClure, any follow-up cross on the redirect?
No, Mr. Examiner, I do not.
All right, perfect. This witness may be excused. Thank you, Mr. Patrick. Ms. Shaheen, do you have a witness?
We do not.
Okay. All right. Ms. Shaheen, you had made an objection. I don't think we've resolved your objection.
I believe we're willing to stand down on that objection.
Okay. And thank you. Based on the research I had done, these exhibits fall squarely within the expertise of a geologist and don't creep into a reservoir engineer. We will give these exhibits the weight we think they deserve. Ms. Hardy, I believe that resolves the only issue that was really before the division. Is there anything else, Ms. Hardy?
No, I don't believe so. I think we were going to submit after this hearing and the revised statement of Mr. Miller to delete those paragraphs that Ms. Shaheen objected to that you had ruled should be excluded. So we need to do that, and we will.
Okay, and so you'll when can you do that?
We can do that by the end of the week.
Okay, excellent. And then we have to come up with a new deadline for closing arguments.
Yes.
So Ms. Hardy, we're talking to you right now. So what's good for you?
I would propose, well, will there be a transcript or are we having an AI transcript?
There'll be an AI transcript for today's hearing, yes.
And do we know when that will be available?
Immediately. I mean, it's within an hour.
Okay.
We get it. We'll
Okay.
post it. And I think Freya will also post the YouTube video too. Freya, have I said anything that's incorrect?
No, the transcript takes about an hour to download, so I'll probably do it tomorrow and I'll post the recording of today's hearing to YouTube probably tomorrow.
Perfect. Let me just remind the parties that the official transcript of today's hearing is the recording. It is not the AI transcript. It makes mistakes, but you can certainly use the transcript to find the place like a log note.
Right.
Okay. So does that help inform you on the closing argument question?
Yes. You know, if we could have 2 weeks from today until November 5th.
Okay. Miss Shaheen, are you okay with that?
That works for me.
Excellent, excellent. Now, Ms. Shaheen, we spoke about the revised exhibit from Ms. Hardy to be submitted by Friday close of business. Are there any other issues that you have?
Not that I can think of at the moment.
All right, excellent. Well, Mr. McClure, is there anything I'm missing?
Nothing from me, Mr. Examiner.
All right, thank you. All right, thank you, Freya, and we're off the record. Everyone have a good day.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye. Awesome.